Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Reds Rundown podcast hosted by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob. He's Joe. And we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Joe, how was your weekend? College football's back, so I'm sure you were over the moon.
Oh yeah, it's good to have my favorite sport be back and have something to take my attention away from the Reds a little bit because it's a little bit unhealthy to watch them, especially this past week. Watched every game, I know on a side screen, but mostly paid attention to football because there's not much left to be figured out for the Reds this season. A couple of things I think we're going to talk about here for the show and do things to keep track of for the last month of the season. But yeah, definitely doing pretty well with college football coming back. But the Reds are the Reds.
Yep, we are in a pretty bad place now. The Reds are 8 games under at the end of this week, Joe, 65 and 73. They could never get past, I think it was 2 games under 500. Well, not never, but just in the last few months. They might have gotten to one, but it's been bad as of late. So we'll go into our question of the day here, Joe. You and I will discuss this as well. But should Alexis Diaz be the closer after blowing two really big saves this weekend? Um, it will. I'll have some data, not some data necessarily, but some interesting facts here later in the episode, Joe. But for the most part, it was a rough week for Alexis. I believe he had 3 appearances and gave up a run, at least a run in each of them. Um, it was a nightmare week for the Reds closer. So, yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. You got any quick thoughts before I hop into our recap of a 2-5 week?
I kind of wish we could do like a twin swap. I know they're brothers, not twins, but with Edwin Diaz, we could have him instead. That'd be really cool if they just changed uniforms like the Morris twins used to do in NBA, or at least it was rumored that they did. That'd be really cool because Alexis Diaz has not been good this year, and that's not the reason why we're at where we're at right now. But it definitely could have helped if he was better. But I'll save my larger thoughts for later.
Okay, well, we'll drop into this. Reds had the off day on Monday, Joe. They go into Oakland, and well, Tony Santillan unfortunately had a rough game. The Reds were up 1-0. They tried to bring it all the way back against Mason Miller. Looked like he was struggling, but he was ultimately able to get out of it. The Reds had some big hits. There's no doubt about it. Espinal with another RBI. Ty France, a lot of timely walks. Spencer Steer with 3 of them in this game, but they would ultimately drop it 5-4. After Jacob Junis looked pretty solid in his start for the Reds. 4 innings pitched. With, I got this right here, only 43 pitches. So I always like to say, I tell my kids when I was coaching baseball, 15 pitches an inning is fantastic. So the fact that he was averaging 10-ish, 10 plus an inning is about perfect. That's all you could have asked for. Then you head into the next game. You accept, hey, maybe the Reds just got unlucky in the first game. I will say, to give the Reds a small bit of, I don't know if people want to use this to make themselves feel better. The Athletics have been one of the better teams in baseball over the last few weeks, so they're starting to find it at a weird time, but I guess that is what it is. But the Reds do lose 9-6 here. The Reds brought it back. They were up 6-5 after a 6-run 7th inning, and it felt like things were really coming around. Will Benson with a huge home run, one of his biggest home runs of the entire year. But this was the start of a really rough weekend for the bullpen. Emilio Pagan comes in and gives up 4 runs, all in the 8th inning, and the Reds were just unable to claw their way back. Then we head into another really rough game, but the Reds did come out on top, 10-9. I will be honest, Joe, I gave up on this game. Once they gave up the runs in the 9th inning, Alexis Diaz could not get a single out in the 9th inning, his 4th blown save of the year. He gives up 3 after Julian Aguilar has a horrible start. He gives up 6. The Reds battle all the way back, scoring runs in 4 straight innings, including another Will Benson home run, a big Ty Steve home run. The Reds were playing well. Stevenson had 3 hits in this game. Dom Smith and Ty France with some big hits. some big walks, but it just ultimately was not enough initially. And then once once Diaz gave up the first run, I said, "Well, this game's over." I was happy to be wrong, as the Reds would rally to win it in the ninth inning on a walk off by T.J. Friedel. So good stuff there. Then you head to another just head scratcher. The Reds go to 10 innings against the Brewers on Thursday. You got some big hits. Santiago Espinal with a big one as well, but a big home run. India with a big home run. Espinal's been like one of the best batters in baseball over the last couple months since the All-Star break. He's batting 264 now, Joe, which is kind of insane when you think about it. But Diaz yet again gives up a run, and the Reds end up losing in the 10th inning to the Brewers, not being able to crawl back. They say it's not an earned run, which I guess, technically is what it is, but again, just a horrible weekend for him. Then in the second game, of Friday, those were the first game of Friday. Second game of Friday, the Reds just get their heads beat in 14-0. Rhett Lauder had his first start and looked pretty solid, honestly, Joe. He had some walks. You could tell the nerves were there, but his stuff looked pretty good. He had 6 strikeouts, 4 innings, only 2 hits given up. 4 walks, though, was the big problem. He's known for not walking guys, so once he gets that a little bit under control, he'll probably be okay. But Carson Spires and I forget Zuleta's first name, how to pronounce it, they give up 7 runs, and then Maley comes in. And that's all she wrote. 6 runs given up after some good innings from him initially. Reds lose big time. You go to Saturday's game. The Reds are in a close one again. They had to do a bullpen day yet again. Buck Farmer gives up 3 runs, on 1 home run. The Reds were able to get a mammoth home run out of Ahmed Rosario, his first as a Red. I believe it was like a 420 shot. Dom Smith with a double as well. But the Reds, yet again, could not claw their way back in this one. They give up 1 run in the 9th inning. Justin Wilson, for some reason, pitching in the 9th inning. I will never understand it. And the Reds end up losing 5-4. Then, in the last game of the week, the Reds go to 11 innings. A lot of baseball played against the Brewers this weekend, Joe. Jake Fraley with his home run on his first at bat back from the injured list. A mammoth shot, easily his furthest home run of the year. Brandon Williamson comes back, Joe. 3 innings pitched, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 5 strikeouts. He did give up the 1 home run to Willie Adames. And then Alexis Diaz would get the win, ultimately, as the Reds would end up walking it off on a Santiago Espinal, hit the pitcher in the leg, Rhys Hines, slide in and score and win the game. So, Joe, it's the pitching staff is just completely torn to shreds. Weirdly enough, the hitting's not been terrible. They haven't been great, but a lot of guys are stepping up when they need to. But it's just too much. The Reds just can't seemingly find it this week. They had the opportunity. They win 2 of 3 against the Athletics, and they find a way to win 2 games against the Brewers instead of 1. Next thing you know, they're 67-71, 4 games under. Still a slight chance with 25 games left, but we already said the nail was in the coffin. This one is the nail through the head, through the coffin, to say the least. There is no more hope for the Cincinnati Reds to make the playoffs, which is a little disappointing, but I don't know, dude. It just looked like the pitching just had nothing left in this series, to be honest with you. I mean, we're relying on Aguilar, who is not ready. People should not be judging him based on what he's doing right now at all. We're relying on Williamson, who's not been hurt literally all season, probably shouldn't have been pitching yet. Then we got the news, I think, this week as well, that Matt McClain they're still for some reason trying to say he might come back. I don't understand the point of it at this point, but and Ian Jabot's been gone all season, Joe. I feel like I haven't heard almost anything about him all year other than he was doing some stuff. Now he's not. Then he wasn't doing some stuff. Now he is. I don't really know what the hell's going on with him, but this week was just abysmal. It doesn't get any easier. I I'm sad. I'm sad to say the least.
Yeah, it definitely should be with the way the Reds have played. We talked about earlier in the season, you know, what this team was doing was not good back in May, right? Like, was that the only losing month was May they've had besides last month until August. This is we said how important those games were, and that's because of now. Like, if they would have played even 500 baseball, then they're in a much better spot. Maybe go get someone at the deadline, all that stuff. I think that needs to be addressed by itself. I actually don't put the losses this past week on David Bell too much. He did use bullpen people in the wrong places, but
Yeah.
with everyone injured, it's hard to figure out. He has so many bullpen days. It's hard to figure out how to manage it, what to do with this. Pitching staff, bullpen overall is it's a mess, and I don't blame them. And the Reds have clearly given up on the season as a front office as well, which I don't blame them for. It was not going to happen, but. The good news is you're right. The bats are heating up, Rob. I'm big on Santiago Espinal. I have been the whole year. We talked about it. He's up to 267 batting average now, 0.6 WAR, and I mean, you think about WAR being cumulative stat. If he would have played every day, would have been having 400 at bats at least, maybe qualified for some league leading categories. Not that he would, maybe other than post All Star break. His WAR's probably up above 1. That's pretty good for a guy who I think we got pretty cheaply too.
Oh, extremely cheap.
I would be willing to say this guy should be your starting third baseman next year if you want to have India in the starting lineup and McClain in the starting lineup and have him somewhere else at left field if you want to have him there, or India somewhere else in the lineup, that's fine. But having a guy that's been so good while not playing that much, even when he's been on this tear, he hasn't even been playing as much as probably he should. This past 5 games, he's had 10 at bats. He had the pinch hit, a couple pinch hit opportunities against the Brewers late in the series, and obviously came through for us in the last game of the series there. But 11 plate appearances, 10 at bats in the last 5 games for a guy who's, like you said, leading the league in batting average pretty much since I think July 2nd is the date they used in the broadcast this week. Crazy to me. I think that's like the one bright spot. We wanted people to step up. We wanted to see guys maybe take their spot in the roster for next year. I'm not sure the Reds are as sold on him as I am. But if you have him in the lineup every day this whole year, I think things change a lot. He did start off the season slow like a lot of our other guys, but I think things do change a little bit. I think this maybe opens up things up of like, hey, we can go sign a free agent first baseman now, or you can put Candy there, or you can put him at DH. You can go sign a free agent DH. You can go sign a free agent outfielder now. That's what opens things up. I think next season needs to be about competing to spots. We're going to get to that in a second here with Alexis Diaz too, but have Santiago Espinal. If you don't sign a huge free agent third baseman who's objectively better than him, start him at third base. Let Marte sit on the bench and get mop up duty. Let him get in the games. Let him get some experience. And let Candy play first base or DH, or have India play first base, DH, or whatever it is. That's what I would probably do. But that's just he's got a lot of heat earlier in the year, and I wanted to shine on Santiago Espinal for really coming through the last 2 months specifically. But even all year, he was doing the little things we talked about, moving the runners over, hitting sac flies when he needed to. I'm very impressed by his play, and I think if he plays every day, he can start seeing these results that he's seen these last 2 months. So that's the bright spot for me. That's the only thing I could say is, hey, maybe we found our third baseman for next year, or maybe we can just say a start. I think we can find a guy who's capable of starting for us next year, and I don't think the Reds thought so 2 months ago. So that's the bright news here.
He makes me think of Kyle Farmer, just in the sense of like the ultimate utility player who I think can start at different spots. He ultimately may be a better hitter. He's definitely a better defender. I think that's the one thing I don't know if you mentioned or not, because I was looking up a few things while you were talking there for a second, because we have Espinal under contract. Like, he's at least in arbitration for the next 2 years. So he will get a pay increase. Whether or not the Reds want to spend that money on him as well will be worth watching, to be honest with you. I don't know if I'd go so far to say that he has won the third base job for me, to be honest with you. He is a career, like, I don't know, 250, 260 guy, which nowadays is good, but we would have to see. Him finding his power definitely gives me some intrigue. I think the other thing, like you said, Joe, this guy doesn't strike out, like, at all. This guy doesn't even have 40 strikeouts yet. And it feels like, Will Benson had that in like a week. So, sorry, Will, catching strays there, but it is interesting. I would like to see him walk a little bit more, but ultimately he's having. I would argue he's having his best season if he did have as many at bats as he did in that All Star season in Toronto in 2022. There is a world where he's batting like 275, maybe like 12 home runs. He's surpassing all of his RBI totals. Like, I don't know that he's not your long term future, that's for sure. But for the next 2 years, if you want to win, this guy's one of the best defenders on the team easily. If you put him and Ellie on that left side, I know Ellie has mistakes, but once he gets like the basics clean up, he's still topping out as one of the best defenders at shortstop in baseball right now, which is wild. So you get him to clean it up, you get Espinal over there. Anything hit to that left side is going to be a black hole. There's just not going to be much that you can do. So I'm not like totally sold on him being the opening day starting third baseman, even with what they have right now. I still would like for them to maybe give Noel V. Marte a shot. We'll see. He's still very young. He's literally 7 years younger than Espinal is, and is a highly touted prospect who had no time really to get ready before the Reds had to shove him into active duty this season. I'm just telling you, he didn't. He didn't have spring training. He only had a few games down in AAA. Like, he wasn't allowed to do baseball activities with the team and everything. I saw a good amount last year. I think he is making young guy mistakes this year, where I think that he can recover from those and be a much better player than what we are seeing at the moment, to be honest with you. Again, he is 22 years old. I think if he has a really good offseason and a great spring training, I think he could absolutely win that third base job, to be honest with you. I think that that is ultimately their plan. But right now, clearly he is not getting better, which is why they have sat him so often. That was one thing I was going to bring up, is very clearly, like, I haven't seen much in the lineup pretty much at all, almost. And it's because the Reds are trying to win at this point. I think starting people like Dom Smith, to be honest with you, makes no sense to me. I would rather see Marte out there every day getting more and more reps. But if they really just don't think that this is his year, then, I mean, that is what it is. But regardless, my point is that I think I really like Espinal. He's absolutely locked a roster spot, in my opinion. He's a guy, and this is why I referred to Kyle Farmer early. I think he's the guy who you have going to every position and giving guys days off and playing, like, not every day, but 5 out of 7 games, right? Where he is like, hey, Matt McLean's having his day off at second base. Okay, cool. Espinal's going in at second base. Oh, we want to have Ellie do a DH day today because he's been playing a lot of shortstop. Okay, Espinal goes in at shortstop. Third base, there's a lot of options there. If he ends up winning it, then great. But if not, then he's giving that guy a beat. We've shown that he can play left field and right field. He'll get better at that. I'm sure they'll have him take more reps there. He can give a spell to those guys as well. There's just he's got a lot to offer, in my opinion. I don't know that he's the starting third baseman yet, but I won't totally crap on that idea, Joe. I just am saying that I think Marte has a much higher ceiling than Espinal does, and I think that if he's able to reach that and start hitting even his floor, then his real floor, then I think then we'll be able to really get a better idea. But I'm not ready to write off Noel V. Marte after 50 games. That's just not enough for me when we're trying to say that Espinal with 45 more games is the guy. You know what I mean? Like, he's got 4 or 5 years of experience on him. I'm not there yet, but I can see where you're coming from, but I'm not at that level yet. I want to see a spring training first before I would crown him over Marte.
Yeah, I don't care about spring training, so that does not matter to me. Marte could bat 1,000 in spring training, and I wouldn't care. There's guys that are not going to be on rosters ever in their lives pitching to him. So, maybe if he hits 500 next spring training, he gets a lot of bats. Maybe I'll walk back on those words. But spring training means absolutely nothing. I will say, on the players on the roster, he should be the starting third baseman next year. Now, I will say, Rob, he is not going to be. I do not think there's any world that he is because the Reds have too much money invested in Candy. They have too much money, or at least future prospects invested in Marte. Usually money dictates these things. It's not how well you play. As much as we would love to think that it's just all pure who's playing the best baseball, a lot of times it's not built like that. Now, Candy, negative zero point 0.4 WAR. It's cool that he's hit some home runs and had that big streak earlier in the season, but not been good. You have Marte, negative 1.3 WAR. That is hard to do in 50 games. That is hard to do. He is breaking new barriers in a bad way. I'm not giving up on him long term, but it might be best that he starts next year in AAA. I'm not gonna lie. Like I think he had more time to get ready for the season. It wasn't seeing live pitching, but he had how many months off waiting for the start of the season. He did get to go to the facilities in Arizona and get stuff ready, then play AAA for a couple weeks and then come up. It's not the most ideal situation, but I don't know. I think that the competition that he has on this roster has been bad this year. And if we could say, hey, next year maybe all these guys are better and that all works out, that's great. But you look at like, if Candy's not doing well, if you want to move Candy to first base, that's fine. Ty France is probably the biggest competition right now. I mean, CES too for the future, but he had a negative zero point 0.9 WAR in 29 games. Again, we're breaking barriers in bad ways here. That's like the big thing. They do have to figure out the third and first base spots collectively. I would love to see them sign a first baseman rather than a third baseman because I think you can get by with the third baseman you have on the roster, the first baseman you have on the roster, unless Ty France continues to play this well or maybe even better than he has for the Reds so far, 253 average. Not knocking him, but just think usually you want more of a power hitter at first base and a guy who can maybe put up some more offensive numbers overall. That, I don't know. I think that's maybe where they lean. But I think on the roster right now, it would take for the last month of the season, Espinal really going down the tubes and Marte really picking things up, and then also the spring training of him vastly outplaying Espinal. But it's not going to, I guess it doesn't matter. It's a moot point because, again, I do not think that's going to be the final answer. Maybe what should happen, and I think you would even say maybe that should be what happens in the future if that's how it goes in your plan too with the spring training. But it's going to be dictated by the money. They may go sign someone else to play third base. They may stick with Candy. They may move Candy to more of a DH role. He is not very good defensively. I don't know what the whole plan is for next year, but we do know they need more hitting help. We do know that Santiago Espinal has hit the ball this last 2 months especially. So we'll see how it all plays out and just hope that the management makes the right decisions based on play on the field instead of money or future plans and giving guys too much of a leash. We'll see.
Yeah, I think honestly, I'm almost at the point where I would cut Candy personally. I think he's taking up too much space for what he's worth. I think they need to drop him like tomorrow. I mean I feel bad, but like this guy was supposed to come in and be our big bopper. Not even our big bopper. Realistically, they tried to promote him as that. I think you and I both saw like I knew he'd hit more home runs this year. I expected him to hit better, and he just hasn't. I will give you this. The weird part is with Espinal, he's basically a 95 gamer guy, except for the one season. His 92 games in 2021, he did have a 2.4 WAR, which is wild to me. So he may have a path in the way that you're saying, where he starts as a backup and then he starts the next year and just goes off. It's a very real possibility. It seems like he's found his power swing. The Reds do need a guy who doesn't strike out very much, Joe. That has to be like a priority. But I'm not even considering Candy for next year, to be honest with you. I'd rather roll with a 22-year-old Marte and see what he's got over a 229 switch hitter that has some power. And to be honest, Candy's also been the worst batter with runners in scoring position in terms of like WAR and a few other stats, based on the amount of opportunities that he's had in Major League Baseball, or not Major League Baseball, at least on the Reds for sure. But he's down near the bottom in Major League Baseball as well, based on the amount of opportunities he's had to score runs. So, and I've said since the beginning, I don't really even like his swing all that much, to be honest with you. It's a weird long swing that I think gets jammed way too often, and I don't think it. If your swing is going to be long and you don't have a lot of power necessarily on the outer part of the plate, it bothers me. I'm not just here to crap completely on him, but I just don't see it. I'll be honest. I just don't.
You're not wrong. Like we said, reasonable expectations is for him to hit 250 to 260 this year, maybe even 265 in the Reds ballpark. I think he's probably hitting the home run totals that we expected from
Yes.
him because he's not ever been a big power guy. But also a lot of them from that month, a couple of months ago, where he was just on a tear.
Yep.
It was very streaky. That's not exactly what we wanted. We wanted a veteran hitter who can consistently help this offense, and that's part of the reason why we are where we are. I'm not opposed to look for them looking this offseason to trade Candy to a team that thinks they can get more out of him, who maybe needs someone of his talents who can play multiple positions, first or third, DH for a team in a pinch, and maybe get more out of him for a different team. I'm not opposed to that. Maybe you free up some money that way, and then you can go use it on a different free agent that can be a power hitter at first base or can be a power hitter at third base and really help drive in some runs. Because that's something I think we found we do need. We play well when we hit for power, but no one's really built to hit for power. No one's even going to come close to 40 home runs this year for us, which is not the norm. But there'll be several players who get there. It's weird to say
Well,
that one team doesn't have anyone close to 40 home runs, but
well,
that's
what's?
that's
I'm sorry. You go. I have an
no, no,
interesting
just
thought on that.
okay. Yeah, it's just that I'm not opposed to getting rid of Candy. I think that a trade more than cutting him is going to be the solution. Whether how much you get back is fine. But really, it's going to be about how much money you save, and if you actually use that money to go sign someone to improve this team, whether it is an outfielder, bullpen help, first baseman, third baseman. I think it probably, obviously based on the war, but I think probably ends up adding to the team rather than having that money and being able to spend it elsewhere rather than keeping Candy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. What I was gonna point out here, and what's interesting, I know we still have a month left in baseball, so I went and checked this actually, maybe last week or the week before, Joe. Last year we had 29 players who hit 30 or more home runs with like 4 or 5 at the 29 mark. This year, the 29th player for home runs has 23. Um, so not only is it more incredible what Judge and Otani are doing, to be honest with you, considering how baseball is clearly like hitting is down, everything is kind of down. Even though, imagine if we had the shift, man, we'd be like, hey, anybody hitting over 220 is, especially left-handers, is good this year. But the home run ball is still sexy, mostly just because the demand for it is high, but the supply is low this year. There are not going to be very many guys that hit 30 home runs this year, Joe. It'll be interesting to see if we even have 25. A lot of these guys, like, I mean, Matt Olson last year hit 54. He's hitting 25 so far this year. So there are a lot of guys who have seen a steep decline. And I'm almost wondering if 25 is going to be the new big number, Joe. I don't know if 40 is going to be reachable right now, especially the way baseball is, by very many guys. Right now, there are maybe 6 guys in the league who are going to hit 40 home runs. Last year, we had, I think, almost that exact amount, 6. So 40 home runs may not be very sexy, or maybe super sexy now, if you want to use that analogy, just because there's just not too many people who are doing it. So it will be worth watching to see that, Joe. I was going to actually say this to you. Is there a world where maybe our power hitters are up the middle? And maybe first and third base for us are going to be the guys who make more contact. And the reason I say that is because with McLean coming back next year, and Ellie's clearly a power hitter as well, Friedel has apparently turned into one, and Stevenson is going to be a 20-plus home run guy potentially this year. I think he's already pretty close, right? Yeah, he's 2 home runs away from it this year. I think he may be a 25 home run guy next year, especially if they end up juicing the balls to kind of, add the home run back in. But what if France and Espinal, if we're using your theory, end up being the guys who maybe aren't the power guys, but they're the guys who aren't going to strike out and who will get on base for you when you need to at the bottom of the lineup to reset things for the top? That's not a terrible thing, and they're decent at. Obviously, Espinal is great at defense. France is okay. He had that one horrible error, I think it was this week, where he threw the ball in the left field, but on a double play. But like, maybe that's what it is. And then you have Spencer Steer for us in left field too, who's having, I think, a much better year than his stats would show you. He's been actually one of the more unlucky hitters in terms of his batting average on ball put in play this year. So I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Like, I agree with you. Generally, you do want that, but like, I think that we have high strikeout, high power guys at shortstop, second base, center field, maybe even catcher. right now. And maybe that's where our power comes from. And if first and third base can be good defenders with, low strikeout numbers. I mean, Ty France with the Reds, he's having a pretty solid season. He's 253 with the Reds. He's only struck out 17 times, walked 8, and 100 at bats. His power numbers aren't anything to die for. I mean, 9 of his 23 hits, almost half of them are for extra base hits. But his OPS is a 738. Like, I'm not trying to push Ty France too much, to be honest. I mean, he and Espinal are kind of in that same realm where they're 29 years old. We'll have to see what happens with them in arbitration and everything. But maybe the Reds just build it a little differently, where their power comes more up the middle and to the outsides in the outfield, and they don't really worry about it as much at first and third base.
I don't think that's realistic because I don't think Friedel's actually going to keep this up, and I don't think McLean is a power hitter. He is very much like Jose Altuve, who has, I think, 2 years of hitting 30 home runs.
It's fair.
Shortstop has changed. It's not the same as it used to be. So power hitting shortstops are very much the norm. Best player usually plays shortstop, and it's very different. But an overall scape of things, I kind of like building a team to hit for average, because I think the thing that disappoints us the most this year is we aren't hitting for average, but we also don't have power. It's more controllable to hit for average right now than to add a bunch of muscle and hit home runs in season. So that's the frustrating part for me. If we want to build a team that's based on average, that's fine. It's not traditional. Don't get me wrong. It's not traditional. Like, we traded Sean Casey away and Dimitri Young away because they did not hit for power, even though they were great contact hitters back in the day. That's a real big flashback.
Yeah, it is.
Much as Sean Casey was a fan favorite, but it's not traditional. But if we want to build a team based on average and really make a premium on hitting for average, I think that's fine. I'm a little bit higher on the home run hitters than you. I do think just because we have a month left of the season, we could see 30 home run people this year, maybe even more. There's guys with 23 right now. He hit 7 more this month. It's possible. We'll see what ends up happening too. But I do think if you want to, not having anyone even in a discussion, Ellie's 22 is tied for 33rd, but that he could be one of the guys, I guess, who gets there. That's not good in itself. That's not good in itself that you don't have a power hitter in the discussion. It's not, but let's build this team around average. I don't mind the idea. I think you could do that, and if you have guys like Friedel and McLean back, that obviously helps the average. If you start Espinal every day, that helps the average. So there's going to be different ways of looking at how to build this roster. I do think that they will probably need to go get a power hitter no matter what to help out this team, whether it's a first baseman, DH, whatever you want to do this offseason if you really want to be competitive. But we'll see what happens. We'll see how they really do this, and a lot of it does come down to how they end up deploying. Spencer Steer next year, probably left field. Is it going to be Espinal on third base? And is CES getting another shot at first base? Are we going to sign someone? Are we trying to win now? Are we trying to develop these young guys? There's a lot of bigger picture things that come into play. The one thing I know is that we better be spending some money to help this team next year. If we do sit here and say, hey, let's give the prospects more time, that's fine at certain positions, but you better bolster everything else to get it to a point where we can win around them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting. I think Steer may be potentially even the linchpin for this team. Most of the time, your batting average on ball put in play is close-ish to 300, right? For most people. Steer's is 270 this year, and he's still having a great year. So, I mean, if you imagine his, batting average going up closer to 260, where it probably should be, he's probably a 260 to 280 type hitter. It's just impressive to me too, because his strikeout rate is very low for Major League Baseball. He's only striking out about 20% of the time, Joe. And his walks have gone up a full point this year to 11%. So that may be your guy that you got to watch for. I mean, I think he's going to ultimately hit close to 25 home runs every year. The big thing is he's driving in almost as many runs as he did last year and 100 less at bats, Joe. He's got a chance at 100. So, we moved this section up. It was the what do the Reds do next? So we still have a couple more we'll get to. But I think my final thought before I'll let you jump in here, Joe, is I think the weird part is the Reds have the superstar pieces, and they've got, I think, some really good supporting pieces. I think it's that middle area that they really need to figure out. Especially with this lineup. You got Ellie. I think McLean, I think you're probably right. McLean is, I think, Altuve-esque. I think he's going to have a lot more doubles, than he is going to have home runs. You're probably right. but and I think Steer is going to be a very similar type player. So I think you got those three guys and Stevenson, probably Friedel, and then we don't really know after that. And Espinal, if you really want to count him as a starter, I'm open to it. And probably Indy. So you got I think three spots. I think you've got right field. You need to figure out first and third base. And I think if they can find some people for that, I'm not against Ty France, by the way, just being a backup. I think he'd be an awesome backup. I think him and Stu Fairchild and Espinal on the bench would make one of the best benches in baseball, personally. But I think they have to figure it out. Like it's almost like they have too many players that you just still don't know enough about, and we're almost a full season through. I'll give real quick on to pitching too. I think we'll dive into it. Maybe actually no, we'll wait. We'll dive into that more with the Brandon Williamson stuff because I think we can talk about Alexis Diaz there too. So that's where I'm at with that one.
That's cool. Yeah, so sorry. I wanted to give some love to Santiago Espinal, and it became a whole thing, and that's fine. That's how it goes. But
it's great.
I'm not opposed. Like again, I think I'm not opposed to anyone besides maybe Ellie and Steer and McLean having their job taken if we sign someone better. And you can even put Friedel in there if he stays healthy. The big thing will be, do we spend the money? Like, is Espinal a starter based on what we have now? I think so, yes, and based on how he's played. Is he a starter if we go sign someone? No. Are we going to sign someone? Are we actually going to spend the money to sign someone? I have no idea. But there are, and God knows some of them have opt-outs or club options. There's decent corner infielders that are out there that we could sign. There's decent shortstops that we could move to third base as well. There's definitely some good free agent outfielders. I don't think we're going to go spend a lot of money to get Juan Soto this offseason, but definitely possible. JD Martinez, the guy we talked about earlier in the season, to help with DH. There's all the guys on the team are fighting for spots, but everything changes if you get a chance to sign one of the big time free agents. Again, we're not going to get Juan Soto. We could get JD Martinez. We could get Eloy Jimenez, who has a club option. He's probably going to go back, but we'll see what happens with all that stuff. There's got like Alex Bregman's a free agent. Paul Goldschmidt. We talked about how he's not doing the best. Pete Alonso. There's guys who might end up hitting free agency. I think a lot of them will go back to their team, but that changes things too. So Santiago Espinal could feel good about where he stands with the team right now, but it doesn't mean if I'm the Reds, I'm not going out and getting a star first baseman, a star third baseman, or a star outfielder right now. I think those three positions by themselves are worth going out and exploring in free agency. The other position, second base, shortstop, center field, I don't think we need to. I mean, if you get a center fielder, you can always move Friedel to right or left, so it doesn't really matter. But I think we could see the Reds be a little bit more aggressive here. History would tell you they're not going to be, but if they actually want to win, plenty of good free agents to help this team. Plenty of more, as you said, Rob, consistent guys, like guys who aren't going to be up and down, guys who can really, just be in the middle, like not be the superstar, but not be the worst player in the world when we try you out there. And that's more of what we need. A guy who can hit 250 and 260 and just, he's going to have his one hit a game, maybe sometimes he goes hitless, but the next game he gets two hits, something like that, where we have more consistency with it. So I'm excited to see what they do in the offseason. I know it's probably not going to be up to our expectations because it never is, but there's plenty of chance for them to get better this offseason. I mean, even like Anthony Santander, there's plenty of guys that get, and that's what makes every offseason so fun. But if the Reds truly want to win, it's going to be on fans to hold them accountable and make sure they spend this money, because what they have in-house right now is not good enough to do anything, even with the growth of the team, because there's so many guys who aren't above the line everyday consistent starters. We have so many guys who are inconsistent.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We'll turn this into the pitching then. Brandon Williamson came back. He honestly looked fine, especially because I don't know that he was ready to come back, Joe, to be honest with you. But I think, they don't have any starters. You got to pitch him. And he reminded me of Brandon Williamson that I saw last year. I think Brandon Williamson's actually a pretty solid pitcher. I know everybody talks so much about all these other guys, and obviously Rhett Lauder coming up way early. We should talk about that too. I didn't have it on there to talk about. We should talk about him. I think he looked very solid, honestly. So I guess maybe we start there at starting pitcher. You got your three. We know Abbott, Williamson, not Williamson. Abbott, Lodolo, and Hunter are going to be fine. They'll be your top three. I'm hesitant, Joe, to go sign another ace necessarily, because I don't know. I just wonder what the rest of the pitching rotation looks like, especially because they've been putting so much emphasis on it in the draft. I don't think you draft Chase Burns and Rhett Lauder to have them get replaced by an all-star pitcher, right? Like, I think the hope is that they will grow into one, unless if they really think Burns is a few years away, and let's say Rhett Lauder in his second start just isn't as good. But I don't know what to do at starting pitcher, because even Williamson, I think he's a fine number 4 or number 5. You got Graham Ashcraft as well. If he figures it out, I think he probably moves to the bullpen, to be honest with you. But like, I don't know what to do with starting pitching, because it feels like we are in the same spot with hitters and pitchers where we have a lot of good potential, but who's gonna figure it out and win, and like what timeline do you actually put on that, right? And it feels like for me, as a Reds fan, and I think a lot of Reds fans would agree with this, we don't like next year. Truly, the best opportunity would be next year they just run all their young guys out there, and then in 2026 is when you really go for it. But I feel like we're all pretty impatient, and I understand that. I agree, right? Like I really do. I want them to go for it next year. I've said it on here before, but the weird part is I feel like next year they should literally just run out as many rookies as they possibly can, figure out who's got it, who really doesn't have it, and then you make your 3-year run from 2026 to 2029 with the guys that you have, because all of them are under contract still. That would be the best years of Stevenson, India, even Friedel. Like that would be like till the end of when they're actually still very, very good. You could go for it for next year as well, but I think starting pitching is going to be, I think, potentially as big of a question mark as you've talked about, Joe. Do you use maybe even some of these young starting pitchers to trade for a hitter, because maybe the market's not the way that you want it to be? I don't know, because let's be honest, if they did go out and sign an ace type guy, at least a number 2 type guy, your top 4 are as good as anybody's in baseball. And at that point, you have 4 guys fighting for a number 5 spot, and that can be good and bad, but then you're potentially wasting some talent. Maybe you're wasting some time with some guys who you've put a lot of stock in. Maybe they should have drafted a freaking hitter earlier if they really are going to end up going this way, Joe. It's hard for me to see what the right answer is, because I think you could go either way and be totally fine. But at the same time, like, if you want to get that guy who you know is going to be great, or at least think is going to be great, then maybe you should go get him. I don't know. Where are you at with this, Joe?
I think enough people have shown flashes, the young guys, that it's time we go get the guys to help them out. Like I think wasting some of these valuable arbitration years would be a mistake, because we do know we have, two superstar, Hunter Green and Ellie, and then some guys who have really figured it out. And there's a lot of concern whether Ellie will re-sign here because of his agent, and Matt McClain as well because of his agent. So I want to maximize these years. I also think that if we do sign a starter, it will make our rotation one of the best in baseball, pending health, with Abbott kind of wearing down as the season goes down on, and Lodolo's constant injuries.
Yeah.
But I think that if you run out with just having the guys we have, it would be a mistake. I think we're running into an issue right now where a lot of the guys are wearing down and getting hurt, and now we're throwing guys into positions we shouldn't be. So I'm a big fan of adding at least one starting pitcher to the rotation, and maybe another guy like Martinez was this year, a guy who could be a spot starter, or maybe that 6th starter in the rotation, just in case Ashcraft moves to the bullpen or is inconsistent, or if Williamson doesn't refine himself. I think it's very important that he is pitching the last month. I don't like that they rushed him back, but I think it's important that he pitches to kind of find his group before next year, whereas the other guys would want them to be shut down because they've already proven enough this year and we're not going anywhere. So that'll be interesting to follow. But at least sign one. The most interesting thing for me, Rob, this whole week wasn't even the Williamson thing, because maybe they know more than I do. Probably know more than I do about his health, and maybe he's ready. Was Rhett Lauder coming up now? Because it starts the service time clock because it was pre-September. Mm-hmm. That's not good for a team that is a small market team who relies on having guys who are roster controlled by the organization. And then also, give him a 40-man roster spot, which we did not need to do. He's still young enough. We didn't need to protect him this winter when the Rule 5 draft goes on. That's, for everyone watching, listening who doesn't know what that is, that's when you get a chance to pick guys who aren't on 40-man rosters of other teams, and you have to put them on your 40-man roster for the whole year, or else they can be taken back. But that's that's intriguing to me that they pushed the issue with Rhett Lauder this quickly. It's okay if you're going to be like, hey, it's Paul Skeens. We want him to start all year and be good. It seems like we did this out of desperation. And I don't really love that because he did have one start in AAA, and that was it. He pitched well the last month or so in Double A. I wanted to see more in Triple A. I wanted to see him probably finish the year in Triple A and maybe earn that spot in the rotation. I get we were desperate to save arms, but all our young guys are out. All the guys who are valuable are pitching. Williamson's just coming back if you want to count him, but everyone else is not pitching. So that was very confusing to me. And for like I mentioned with Ellie and McLean, I don't want to waste years of roster control on something like this. So it made it interesting to me. I would have waited till after September to bring him up. That was interesting, but I would sign an extra starter. And then hey, best case scenario next year, Rob, if you sign a starter, whoever it is, the ace, just say you have an ace, you have Green, you have Lodolo, you have Abbott, and then you have, say, Lauder's the fifth starter, or maybe Williamson, whoever wins it. That's a very good rotation. And if someone like Abbott struggles down the stretch, then you throw in Williamson to be the starter. You throw in Ashcraft if he's still around. You can figure it out. That gives you more depth for the rotation, even if some of those guys move to the bullpen to help the bullpen out too, which is something we also need to do after trading away Lucas Sims and having guys who had hot starts and have fallen on their faces recently.
Yeah, they got to figure out the bullpen too, because I think I'll agree with you on that. I think the last part I want to move to before we start kind of heading into our preview and wrapping stuff up with the division talk real quick. Alexis Diaz just can't be the closer, man. I'm sorry. I know it's only 1 year of him. He's been great the last few years up until this year. And realistically, while he was giving up a run, and again, I always refer to Coco Cordero because it was like, if the Reds were up 3, he was giving up 1 or 2. If the Reds were up 2, he was giving up 1 or, well, sometimes 2, but not very often. If the Reds were up 1, he seemingly was locking it down. It was a very weird thing, but it was like he always played with that cushion. It felt like Diaz was turning into that, and then this week, it just, that strategy stopped working. I want to see the Reds be very aggressive with a back-end bullpen guy. I don't know who it is. I don't really care. Go out and find somebody because I just don't think Diaz is it. I kind of worried about him even last year with some of the stuff that he was doing, but it feels like he's lost a little bit. His motion is just, it's so hard to repeat. It is very hard to repeat his throwing motion, and I worry a little bit about doing that. So I think that's his issue, personally. We'll have to see. Maybe they find a way to give him a more repeatable motion, but I think that's also what makes him good, is that he's effectively wild. And you can have great years and bad years, but he's having a bad year this year. I know the weird part is I actually saw a stat earlier this week. I was going to send it to you, Joe, but the Reds have the least blown saves in baseball. And I thought about it and I was like, well, it's partially because we've already gone into the ninth inning being down 1 and not being able to come back. And then we've also been winning by a ton. And to be fair, Diaz did have like a 3-month stretch where he didn't blow a save. But it just still feels like he's not reliable. And I want somebody who is reliable. If this team's going to win, they need somebody who's reliable.
With you on that, at best, he needs to compete for the closer job next year. And you can say, hey, maybe he's pitched well in the past. But, I think the Reds should go get several back end of the bullpen guys. I think that was one of their biggest issues is Brando Cruz maybe at his early start maybe covered up some of the issues. Like Lucas Sims did not have doing a good job in the 8th inning specifically, or like we talked about. Sometimes guys have clean innings they don't have, and they do poorly, or they have guys on base and they do poorly. It's definitely something I want to see guys more reliable who can handle any situation. So next year we can have Diaz as part of one of the guys who comes in and does get some relief work in the late innings or maybe win the closer job. But if they don't add 2 to 3 arms of guys who could be setup guys or closers, I think it's a failed offseason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's at least 2. I think you could, especially if they keep Martinez and they keep him in the bullpen, which is where I think he needs to be. Yes, would he be one of the most overpaid bullpen guys in Major League Baseball? Absolutely. But I can't go with Emilio Pagan and Alexis Diaz next season being your guys at the back there. Like, I'd rather them give Tony Santillan a chance, to be honest with you. I really would at this point. So yeah, I think that's where we're at with what's next for the Reds. They've got a lot to go over. Joe and I think we'll dive into it a little bit more a month from now once the season's over. But I figured this was the right time before they do some September call-ups. We'll see who comes up. I don't really know that it matters. They've had to go so deep at this point that they'll call up a bunch of guys who we'll probably never see again, to be honest with you. But that's okay. That is what it is. Last thing I want to talk about here is division record, Joe. It's a very weird one. I get the Brewers at 4-9, but the fact that we have a 3-7 record against the Pirates, we still have 3 games against them. We have a 6-4 record and a 7-3 record against the Cardinals and Cubs, respectively. It's just weird because like I went into this and I was like, I thought it was going to be worse. First off, to be completely honest with you, I really did. But they're what 20-29. I think, is that what it is? Am I wrong on that? 16, 20, 23. Okay, 2023. Sorry, in their division, which is not terrible, but at the same time, it's like they're just beating up on the Cubs and the Cardinals. When in reality, I feel like they should be doing that against the Pirates as well. I just like, where do you see us in this division right now, Joe? I'm very confused as to where we are because I feel like we should be talent-wise, the second best team. And like even the division records outside of the Pirates one shows that, but it just feels like maybe the Pirates are our kryptonite. I don't know. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty obviously a dog shit division. It goes a long way when the Cardinals aren't the Cardinals of old and the Cubs aren't spending money like they used to. The Brewers are definitely doing their part to put a thorn in our side, but that to me, like the 2023 record, stands out as like this. If this team was actually competitive, it should be closer to like 25-18 or whatever that math comes out to. It should be we're winning the division games because this division is pretty bad. The Pirates are a thorn in our side. I don't really understand it. We know Hunter Green pitches well against them specifically at their ballpark, but overall, but it seems like other pitchers struggle there. So I'm interested to see what we do in the future. The Pirates are better this year, so it makes a little bit more sense. They're,
Yeah.
I think, similarly talented when you take into effect Paul Skeens is amazing too, but we should be better than them just a little bit. So it should be, again, if we wanted to be serious about winning, 25-18 is where we need to be. And some wins against the Brewers need to come by too. Like we can't just go to every series against them and expect the loss going into it because that's definitely happening.
Yeah, no, it's been wild, and I wonder if it's just because like we have all year struggled against good pitching, and that is kind of their calling card, but they just can't hit. So maybe it's just that. I mean, we've had a lot of close games with them as well, so maybe just we need some extra time with it, or I don't know. We need to figure out hitting against them in that ballpark. It feels like we also had a few like big hits that were not home runs because they hit that weird little alcove that they have there. I knew it, that happened to us at least twice in the last series there. So yeah, we got one more against them. I believe it's at home, Joe. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's at home. So there is a world where the Reds can still finish with a winning record against their division. Very much so. They still have 3 against the Pirates, Cubs, and the Cardinals. So, there's a real world where they can even go, shoot, what would that be, like 4-5 or 3-6, and they'd still finish with like a 500 or close to a 500 record against their division. But it's just not being able to beat the Brewers and the Pirates is just too much for me. I still don't even think that Brewers team is very good, to be honest with you. Like they get it done. They are sound in their baseball, but I don't know that they're talent wise that much better than the Reds. And it's just frustrating to watch them, especially considering the fact that they will be better next year with some major arms and Christian Yelich coming back. They will be better, and a full year more under Bryce Terang, Sal Frelick, all these guys' belts. They are the team to watch for me in the division with the Pirates and us as well. So let's move on real quick. We got the Astros and the Mets. Astros are absolutely on fire after starting the year terribly. They are now, I believe it's 1 game out of the division. They are playing extremely well, Joe. What are you seeing with this series? What are you looking at? I would do the lineups, but we're running a little low on time, so let's just hop into it. Tell me what you're thinking here with the Astros.
Good starting pitching. This is not the lineup they had. Pitching overall too. Josh Hader as a closer is pretty good, and
Yeah.
they've done a good job of building the pitching staff. This is not the lineup that they've had when they've been really competitive over the last couple of years. They still have Altuve. He's obviously aging. They still have Bregman. But a lot of the guys, and Jordan Alvarez too, deserves a shout out. But a
Yeah.
lot of the guys they had when they were making those World Series runs are just not the same. So I think pitching's the difference here. The Astros have a lot of it, and we do not, and that's going to be the difference.
Yeah, and I think that that's absolutely going to be the difference as well. Even though we are at home, I think I'm going to go with a 1-2, Joe. The Astros are 13 games over 500. We're getting Verlander in game one. I do think there's a world where we can beat Arrighetti in game two, depending on who actually pitches for us. We'll have to see what happens, but poor Julian Aguilar has to go up against a Hall of Famer. So I'm not really anticipating much coming from tonight's game, but I think the Reds could find a way to win one game this week. They seem to at least win one in every series, even if they're completely outclassed like we were against the Brewers this weekend. So I see them going 1-2. I'm pulling your strategy out because I'm tired of being completely wrong.
Gotcha. Yeah, 1 and 2 for me too. The pitching's too good, and with the way our pitching is, we don't even know who's starting every game at this point. Like you look at some of the projected starters for every one other team, and they're like at least have an idea. Sometimes it changes. We don't have no idea. So we're going 1 and 2 here.
Yeah, and then we've got a 3-game weekend series against the Mets. Joe, last time we saw them, you were a little less confident about how good they are. They have certainly picked it up throughout the season. They are only one game out of the wild card now, behind the Braves. They've been playing some solid baseball. What are you seeing with them? Your boy JD Martinez has been hitting well. Lindor is on his way to potentially an MVP type season. Jesse Winker will be coming back home. He's been playing pretty well for them as well since they traded for him from Washington. Where are you at with this team, Joe?
Yeah, jealous that they signed JD Martinez as always, and we did not. But yeah, this is about the hitters. Francisco Lindor had an awful start to the season, so good for him for turning it around. He got a lot of social media hate that was,
Mm-hmm.
the hate wasn't warranted. The play wasn't good, but the hate wasn't warranted. Put it that way. This is a lineup that you don't want to have to face. I think they have a lot of good players who can hit the ball. The pitching for me is very hit or miss, and that's where the Reds can get an edge here. It's good to have Edwin Diaz at the back of the bullpen. I mentioned earlier it'd be nice to have him, but it's always good when the Twins play. The brothers play against each other. For me, I'll go ahead and make my prediction. I'm going to say 2-1 actually. This is on the road. This is against a good lineup, but the Reds will do something. I can't pick 1 and 2 every single series the rest of the way. I got to change it up a little bit, and the pitching does leave something on the table for the Reds to go get if they still want to show up and play baseball.
I completely agree. I'm still gonna go 1-2 though. I just I'm sorry. I'm copping out right now, man. But this team is playing pretty well. I believe we're playing them on the road, so I'm just not feeling overly confident about that. To be honest with you, it just last time we went to New York though we swept the Yankees. So what do I know? I'll be honest. I just still think that this team has been better. I will say I think if we had our top starting three and even just one more healthy hitter, I would actually probably pick at least this series, maybe even both of them for the Reds. But dude, just with no pitching, my optimism is gone. My feelings for anything other than 1-2s for probably the rest of the season at this point are very low. I really thought we would take care of business better against the Athletics, and we scraped out a win against that team. We made Lawrence Butler look like an all-star, which he may end up being. I don't know, but the fact that he had, I think, 6 home runs in the series, at least 5, was just too much for me to handle. I'll be honest with you. So my optimism has left me, sadly. But I still love this team. I know you guys do too. You should still keep watching. Ty Stevenson is working his way to being one of the best catchers hitting wise in baseball. He has been on an absolute tear. His batting average is way up in the 260s now. Ellie's still having a really good season. Would love to see him finish strong. Um, we'll have to watch the rest of these guys as well. Who's going to get the at-bats, who's not. And we'll see if Rhett Lauder and Brandon Williamson are going to actually put their way into the conversation for next year, Joe. So any final wise words before we head into officially football season for the rest of us who are not obsessed with college football on Thursday?
I always try to end these with some fun facts. The first one, if anyone wants to feel old, so I guess maybe not a fun fact, Dusty Baker's kid was called up by the Nationals, the kid that we always saw running around back in the day, I guess would be the best way to put that. And number two, I watched 2 episodes of the Pete Rose documentary on HBO. Very well done. A couple weird things, like to compare like the Bengals winning Super Bowls to how the Reds were. It's weird, even though the Bengals have won a Super Bowl when they were in the Super Bowl. But it's good to see how awesome of a player Pete Rose, but also how he keeps on digging his own grave in terms of getting into the Hall of Fame. If you think he should be in the Hall of Fame, or if you think that because his behaviors don't warrant that, it's an interesting look. So very good job by HBO to get that. I'm only through 2 episodes. I'll update if I see anything interesting in the last two.
Hopefully you'll have to see if I can maybe I'll get convinced to watch it. I still need to watch Hard Knocks. I've somehow been missing that, even though I just recently got HBO Max. So need to hop into that one for sure. But yeah, guys, keep watching the Reds as much as you can. I know it's tough, but there are good things and interesting things that'll happen in this last month. I got one more game to go to. I'll be at Bark in the Park here in a couple weeks on that Wednesday night game. So definitely looking forward to doing that. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us this week, guys. So with that, we'll catch you on the next one.